Hey everybody, welcome into the Alabama Recruiting Show. I'm Hannah Chalker alongside our Alabama recruiting reporter, Chris Kirschner. Thanks everybody for joining us today. This is where you can get all the most in-depth information and latest news on the future of the Alabama football program, so you're going to want to join us here every single Tuesday. And how about that absolute whipping of Tennessee? It was the third Saturday in October, 45-7 win in Bryant-Denny Stadium over the Volunteers. How about that win, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a big win for Alabama. It was clear that Alabama was going to win this game heading into it just because of all the uncertainty following that Tennessee program. The cigar smoke filled up the stands early in the fourth quarter, and again, it was just a big-time win for Alabama, especially with hosting several big-time recruits.
Yeah, and with the win, they moved to 8-0 on the season, still sit at #1 in the nation. And like you said, people were smoking the cigars. It's a tradition that Alabama does after beating Tennessee. Not smoking cigars, though, were the recruits. Most of them are underage, not 18. So tell me about some of the big-name guys that were there on the sidelines that were hopefully really impressed by head coach Nick Saban and the Alabama team.
Yeah, it was definitely one of Alabama's biggest recruiting weekends of the fall. Alabama hosted several of its top targets in the 2018 and 2019 class. Some of those names include four-star quarterback Emory Jones, four-star defensive tackle Bobby Brown, four-star offensive lineman Penei Sewell and Emil Ekiyor. Nebraska wide receiver commit Joshua Moore was in town. Jalen Armour-Davis, Alabama cornerback commit. Cameron Latu, a four-star Jack linebacker, was in town. Pierce Quick, a 2019 offensive lineman, was also in town. So it was definitely a big-time recruiting event for Alabama this past weekend.
And fans, you're going to want to remember all of those names as the recruiting season rolls on. We already have some people commenting on Facebook. Michael Bates says roll tide. Tegan Marsh says roll tide roll. So continue to have your comments roll in as the broadcast goes on. And if you have any questions for Chris, we'll just get those right over and hopefully answer all of your questions. Well, let's start off by talking about a name you already mentioned, and that's Emory Jones. It was his fourth visit to Tuscaloosa, watching Alabama, not including, though, the season opener where Alabama played FSU in Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Huge atmosphere there for a recruit like Emory Jones. What's the status of him and his relationship with Alabama?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting storyline to follow. Jones is committed to Ohio State, but he was in town this past weekend for an official visit. And from talking with people close to the Alabama program, Alabama definitely feels like it can flip Emory Jones from Ohio State. He got to Tuscaloosa Saturday morning. He left Monday morning. I quickly chatted with his coach, Tim Barron, at Heard County High School, and Coach Barron told me that Emory is trying to keep his recruitment as quiet as possible. Now, I know some Ohio State fans reached out to me on Twitter saying, Emory said he wasn't going to be in Tuscaloosa this weekend, but turns out he was. It's definitely something to keep an eye on moving forward. Like I said, Alabama definitely feels like it can flip Emory Jones from Ohio State. Now, he's scheduled to take an official visit to Columbus this weekend, so we may get some clarity on where Jones stands with the Buckeyes after this weekend.
He may be trying to keep it quiet, but he's not doing the best job of it, because there he was on the sidelines for the Tennessee game inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. But what does this do for Ohio State? It's been rumored that they're reaching out to other quarterbacks. Does that mean that Emory Jones is heating up his relationship with Alabama? And is Ohio State worried about this commitment?
Yeah, I think Ohio State is definitely worried, and they have every right to be worried at this point. Like you said, it was his fourth visit to Tuscaloosa this fall, and not including the season opener in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. And, for Ohio State to start reaching out to other quarterbacks, according to Jeremy Birmingham of our Land of 10 website, covers Ohio State Buckeyes recruiting, he said that Ohio State has already reached out to Kentucky quarterback commit Jaron Williams and Virginia Tech quarterback commit Quincy Patterson. So we'll see what Jones is going to do. Like I said, he's going to take an official visit to Columbus this weekend, and I'm sure the Buckeye staff is going to sit down with him and try to get an answer of just where he stands with Ohio State. It wouldn't be a surprise at all to see him come out with some statement shortly after this Ohio State visit. about just where he stands with his recruitment, if he's going to flip to Alabama or if he's going to stick with Ohio State. Like I said, I talked with his coach, and Jones is trying to keep his recruitment as quiet as possible. So perhaps he just waits till after the season. Heard County is expected to make a playoff run, so we'll see what happens, but Ohio State is definitely worried.
Thanks, Chris. Those are some really interesting notes on Emory Jones, and we'll continue to follow that story. Now, we also have a commenter here that you kind of answered her question, though. Ricky Cochran, Ricky Cochran, when do you think Jones makes a decision after his OSU visit? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's possible that Emory decides to go ahead and come out with a statement shortly after his Ohio State visit. But like I said, his coach said that Emory is trying to keep his recruitment as possible. So it's maybe possible that he just waits until the season ends. So we'll see. Again, it's not really a clear situation just because Jones is trying to be as quiet as possible. Okay, well, let's move right along to another player that was on the sidelines this past week, and that's Emil Ekiyor. Trying to make sure I get that pronunciation right. Emil Ekiyor, nailed it. An offensive lineman who's also committed to a Big Ten school in Michigan. So how big was that he was there on the sidelines this past weekend? It was very big. You know, he did take an official visit to Alabama on September 30th for the Ole Miss. And for him to make the drive from Indianapolis, which is where he lives, to Tuscaloosa this past week, really shows that Ekiyor is considering flipping from Michigan Alabama program visit for the Ole Miss game, and after this visit this past weekend, and pretty much everybody I talked to expects Ekiyor to flip his commitment from Alabama. It's a matter of when. Is that he just didn't go ahead and make the decision this past weekend when he was in town. I know any he will announce? No, I mean, he is going to. Yeah, I mean, some recruits do that. Okay. He's going to do that at this point. Offensive lineman Penei Sewell. He's also torn between two schools. That's Alabama and Oregon, according to his father, who gave us that information. What do you think? Where do you think he stands on his commitment to Alabama? Well, he's not committed to Alabama just yet, but I think Alabama definitely has a really good shot at landing his commitment whenever he decides. To Gabriel last night, he told me that the official visit to Alabama this past weekend went really, really well. He actually said, you know, Utah is also in the mix. They're from Utah, but again, I expect him to choose either Alabama. And from all my conversations with Gabriel, it seems like Alabama has the best chance at landing his commitment whenever he decides. He doesn't have a set commitment date just yet, but like Emory Jones and Emil Ekiyor, it's possible that he goes ahead and makes a decision in these coming weeks. Sewell is planning on signing during the early signing period in December, so we should expect some movement on where he stands with Alabama and Oregon in these coming weeks. But as of now, I expect Alabama to land his commitment. Awesome. We're getting some really great comments on Facebook here. We're going to get to all of them, I promise you. But for one, sticking with this topic, since we're talking about offensive linemen, Josh Schutzer says, are there any more big-time O-line recruits out there besides the two guys that we just mentioned? Yeah, Penei Sewell and Emil Ekiyor are Alabama's top offensive line targets at this point, along with four-star offensive tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere. The thing with Petit-Frere is that he is pretty much silent when it comes to the media. There's really no reads on where he's leaning. For several months now, it seems like it's an Alabama, Florida, Notre Dame race. With Florida struggling, it's possible that Florida is more so third on that list between Alabama, Notre Dame, and Florida. So it's possible that Petit-Frere, Alabama's expecting him to visit this fall. He hasn't done so just yet. But again, with him being so silent about his recruitment, it's really hard to get a read of where he stands. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball real quick, four-star defensive tackle Bobby Brown is near commitment. This is a guy who knows when he's going to make his commitment. That's November 2nd. What is his status with Alabama? Yeah, Bobby Brown has been Alabama's top defensive tackle target since the summer. Took an official visit to Tuscaloosa this past weekend. I was told that the visit went great, according to people close to the Alabama program. And that's big because, like you said, he's going to make his commitment on November 2nd. It's likely going to come down between Alabama and Texas A&M. He's scheduled to take an official visit to Texas A&M this weekend. Now, that's definitely concerning because, like you said, he's committing on November 2nd, so Texas A&M is going to have the last chance to impress Brown before he goes ahead and makes that decision. Now, like a lot of these high school players, just because they verbally commit somewhere doesn't mean that they're locked into that commitment. It happens all the time. Kids flip, kids decommit. But Bobby Brown, from talking with him, it seems like once he makes his decision, he's going to be locked in with his commitment. Since the summer, I've projected Alabama to sign Bobby Brown. He visited over the summer for Alabama's offensive line, defensive line camp. And when I talked to him over the summer, it was clear that Alabama had a pretty sizable lead over its competitors. Like I mentioned, Texas, also Oklahoma and Texas, they're also in the mix for Bobby Brown. But as of today, if I had to make a prediction, I think Alabama will land Bobby Brown.
You actually got some inside information that said those visits this past summer were great. Give me some information on why those visits were so great for Bobby Brown.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama just made it clear to Bobby Brown that he is the team's top defensive tackle target in the 2018 class. With Alabama needing several elite interior defensive linemen in this class, the staff made it clear to Brown that he's that could make an instant impact. And, when recruits hear that at Alabama,
teams, probably, right?
Yeah, I mean, with the amount of talent that Alabama has, they could definitely split off and make two teams and probably, be the top 5 teams. Yeah, I mean, they could have a top 5 team if they did split off and make two teams. Just the way Alabama recruits over the years, 7 straight #1 recruiting classes. Nick Saban has shown college football fans, college football coaches, players, that he is the best when it comes to recruiting. So, if Alabama did split off into 2 teams, maybe they could compete against one another in the national championship game.
All right, well, let's move on to some news that just happened last night. And this is the top JUCO tight end in the country. That's Dominic Wood Anderson. He actually decommitted from Texas last night. And it's kind of been a whirlwind recruitment. He was silently committed to 4 different schools. Seems like a lot of work and a lot of secrecy. So what does that mean for Alabama? Do they have a chance at him?
Yeah, I think Alabama definitely has a chance, but like you mentioned, it's been a whirlwind of a recruitment. The day he actually committed to Texas, he actually spoke with Nick Saban the morning of and told Nick Saban that he was going to commit to Alabama later that day. He was going to release a statement on Twitter, which he did, but it turns out that statement that he released was him committing to Texas. So it's definitely been a recruitment that's been all over the map, for sure. Like you mentioned, he's been silently committed to 4 different schools: Alabama, Texas, Oregon, and Louisville. But from checking with my sources in Tuscaloosa, Alabama definitely feels like this time around that they can land Dominic Wood Anderson, the nation's #1 junior college tight end. out of Arizona whenever he makes his next commitment. So we'll see. Just because of how all over the place he's been, it's hard to say yes, he's going to choose Alabama whenever he commits, just because he's already told Alabama he's going to commit, and for him then he chose Texas. So we'll see what happens moving forward.
All right, we'll keep that name in your back pocket. And fans, it's time to roll back the comment section here, and going to bring up some things that we were talking about before, like Emory Jones. And we have a commenter, David Slay, says we already have 3 elite QBs there right now, and 2 his brother could be there in a couple of years. You know, why do they need Emory Jones?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can add an elite quarterback to your roster, you want to do that.
Yeah, just look at Georgia, right?
Exactly. I mean, Georgia has Jacob Eason, a 5-star quarterback. They just added Justin Fields, the nation's #1 overall recruit. Jake Fromm's there. So, I mean, anytime you can add an elite quarterback, an Under Armour All-American to your roster, you do so. It doesn't matter if you have 4 or 5 quarterbacks. If Emory Jones wants to commit to Alabama, you welcome him with open arms. Yes, I get your point about having 3 quarterbacks already in Tuscaloosa: Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, and Mac Jones. But you know, Emory Jones, Alabama feels like he can come in and compete with those guys. So that's why you still recruit a quarterback of his caliber.
Joseph Campbell is asking, outside of Jones, who do you think is the next big name commitment?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about him, Bobby Brown. He has a set commitment date, November 2nd. Depending on how things go with his visit to Texas A&M this upcoming weekend, I expect Bobby Brown to commit to Alabama on November 2nd, barring any unforeseen, I guess, love affair with Texas A&M this weekend. Yes, he loves Texas A&M, but Alabama is the nation's top program, and they do have the opportunity for a true freshman to come in next year on the defensive line and play.
Jazz Hatcher says we lost 2 of our best recruiters, DL coach and tight end/OT coaches. How has that been affecting recruiting? We talked about in last show, if you guys weren't tuning in, that Alabama's having a bit of a slow year. Unlike other years, we still expect them to have a very elite recruiting class. They've been #1 in the nation in recruiting the past 7 years. So does that affect recruiting, and is that the reason for kind of getting off to a slow start? Didn't we say they were number 23 in the country according to 247sports.com? And really that means nothing at this point, guys, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, losing elite recruiters on your staff definitely hurts Alabama. Like the commenter mentioned, Alabama lost Bo Davis, defensive line coach, last year. He resigned. Billy Napier, wide receivers coach, left for Arizona State, and Mario Cristobal also left for Oregon. So losing 3 very, very elite recruiters definitely impacts Alabama's recruiting efforts, just because in recruiting it's really all about relationships. And these kids over the years have built up a relationship with Napier and Cristobal and Bo Davis before he left. So it definitely hurts. So the guys that Alabama needs to hire, they have to pretty much start from ground one and build up the trust that those guys had with the recruits. So that's definitely been something that has affected Alabama this year. But the amount of numbers that Alabama has scholarship-wise, Nick Saban himself said that Alabama can only sign 22 recruits this year. That has definitely impacted Alabama's slow start. And, the Crimson Tide are doing their due diligence when it comes to evaluations this year. So like Hannah said, I really don't expect much, I guess, of a dip when it comes to Alabama recruiting. Alabama's had the nation's #1 recruiting class 7 years running. I don't think Alabama's going to have the #1 class this year, but I do expect Alabama to have a top 5 class.
You said Ohio State last week as #1 in the country. Are you planning on Emory Jones staying there? Is that what makes Ohio State #1 in your opinion?
I mean,
this is, of course, we obviously want Alabama to have a great recruiting class, but we're trying to be as equal as possible here.
Yeah, I mean, Emory Jones definitely helps Ohio State's efforts when it comes to getting the #1 class, but Ohio State, I believe, has 5 stars already committed in its 2018 class. They're in the race for several more, and that's really the reason why I think Ohio State will have the #1 class this year.
Okay, we're getting a couple of questions about linebackers too. We're going to be off air here in about like 10 minutes or less, so once we're done, you can just scroll on back and listen to our entire conversation about defensive tackles and linemen there. I'm Hannah Chalker. This is Chris Kirchner. He's our Alabama recruiting reporter for SEC Country. You can head on over to SECCountry.com. And where can people find you there too?
Yeah, if you just go to SECCountry.com, click Alabama as your team, scroll on over to the recruiting section, and all my stories on Alabama recruiting will be there.
Awesome. Well, Alabama actually heads into a bye this week, maybe much needed for the Tide. They're 8-0, probably a little bit winded at this point, so obviously a score like 47-5, 45-7 would not show you that they need a bye week, but a bye week is always much needed. So the players might be getting some rest, but certainly not the coaches. Recruiting never stops. Chris, tell me about some of the big time names that coaches are going to be after this weekend, even though that it's a bye.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, recruiting never stops just because it's a bye week. Actually, recruiting picks up during the bye week just because the coaches have the time and luxury of going out to recruit some of its top targets. So Alabama is expected to see 4-star quarterback Tanner McKee this weekend out in California. I was told outside linebackers coach Tosh Lupoy will actually be the coach on the sidelines for that game, and Tanner McKee is actually his team, Centennial High School, is going up against Norco High School, which is the home of a current offensive line commit, Jarrett Bell. So Tosh will get to see Tanner McKee, who is one of the team's top quarterback targets, along with Emory Jones and Jaron Williams, and he'll get to see Jarrett Bell. So that's definitely one of the biggest names that Alabama will see. Gabriel Sewell, Penei Sewell's father, told me that Alabama is also expecting to make a stop in Utah this weekend to see his son. So it's going to be a busy week for Alabama on the road. Coaches will definitely be on the phones, texting and calling all these recruits.
We have another good question that's came in, and this is a name that we have not mentioned today. Ricky Cochran chimes back in. Do you think a decisive win against LSU sways Pat Surtain Jr. from them even more?
Yeah, I mean, I think a win over LSU, especially a convincing win over LSU, can definitely help Alabama in the recruitment of 5-star cornerback Patrick Surtain Jr. He said that he's going to make a commitment on National Signing Day. LSU has been the longtime favorite for Surtain. He's from the Louisiana area, really calls Louisiana home, even though he lives in Florida now. So a convincing win over the Tigers next weekend can definitely help. It wouldn't be a surprise to see Patrick Surtain be one of the top visitors for that game. It's going to be a loaded visitors list when that list gets posted on SECCountry.com. It's pretty much going to be a who's who, and Surtain will likely be on that list.
Donald Schultz once again says, nice to meet you guys. Nice to meet you too. Join us right here every Tuesday for all the latest in Alabama recruiting and the future of the program. This guy has so much knowledge, so we always want to have your comments. So final thoughts, Chris. I know we have 11 commits, 7 4-stars, 4 3-stars. If we have that full commit list, you know, who stands out to you, and just give me your final thoughts on the guys that Alabama has right now.
Yeah, I mean, right now, like you said, Alabama has 11 commitments, and this class is definitely elite as is. Alabama, last time I checked, the average star rating for these guys was around a 91, and that was good for 3rd the last time I checked the recruiting ranking. So that just tells you the amount of talent that Alabama actually has this year. A lot of those guys on that list you see are Under Armour or Army All-Americans. So those are the cream of the crop when it comes to high school football players in the country. And Alabama, you know, they still have tons of uncommitted guys out there, guys who we mentioned that they're trying to flip. So like we said, I mean, Alabama may not have the #1 recruiting class this year, but this class is definitely going to be one of the nation's best when National Signing Day rolls around.
And finally, is there a name that we haven't mentioned that is somebody that viewers watching can keep their eye on, maybe even for the 2019 class?
Yeah, I mean, one of the commenters mentioned him. I mean, Taulia Tagovailoa. Obviously, Alabama fans I'm on the sidelines for the game. Whenever Tua comes in, I hear the crowd just yelling Tua, Tua. And perhaps in 2019, the name that they're yelling is Taulia. That's Tua's little brother. He's a 4-star quarterback from Thompson High School in Alabaster, Alabama. From all my conversations with Taulia, he's absolutely in love with the program. It's just a matter if Alabama is going to want his commitment. Just because a recruit likes the school doesn't necessarily mean that the school likes them back. But as of now, with the way that Taulia has carried Thompson High School, it would not be a surprise at all to see him jump on Alabama's 2019 commitment list in the coming weeks or months.
Awesome, and what a cool storyline that would be for Alabama. So one more time, tell us where, for people just tuning in, tell them where they can find all of your recruiting information so that they can have it 24/7.
Yeah, just go to seccountry.com. Click Alabama as your team, click on the recruiting section, and all of our stories are there. You can also follow me on Twitter, Chris Kirschner. I try to interact with the fans as much as possible.
All right, well, thanks so much, Chris. I'm Hannah Chalker. You can follow me at Hannah Chalker, and we're going to be here every Tuesday at 5 o'clock, so come back, join us for all the latest information. Thanks so much for watching this Alabama recruiting show on SEC Country.